Welcome to the Little Bit of Life podcast, the podcast that goes beyond the polished posts and into the heart of real stories. I'm your host, Tabitha, better known as Little on social media. Think you've seen it all, heard it all? Not quite. Here, we're diving into those unfiltered, real, and sometimes unexpected conversations that we all think about but rarely say out loud. Along the way, I'll be joined by special guests who have left a mark on my journey, adding fresh perspectives and unforgettable insights. So kick back, relax, and let this be your moment. You've earned it. Let's dive into today's story, one word, one revelation at a time. Hey, everybody, welcome in a Little Bit of Life podcast right here with your host, Little. We have on an amazing, I call her the transformation coach, because if she can transform her own life, y'all, she can transform our lives just by listening to this episode. Her name is Malaysia. It is good to see you, Miss Gorgeous. How are you?
Thank you so much, Tabitha. I'm so blessed to be here, and I'm just so honored to have the opportunity to be on your show today.
For most of us, we feel we can get stuck in how we were raised, generational curses, even things that could be affecting us mentally, physically, emotionally. And we're going to talk about everything in between because you don't have to be stuck in that sense of transformation. She's going to tell us how we're going to do it because you've been through it. When we say you've been through it, you've been through it.
Yes. Yeah, I have. I've been through it, and I feel like life is a journey. So I feel like we're continuing to go through, and I believe it's for a reason. I don't think, things just happen haphazardly. Ultimately, despite the challenges that we go through, there's an opportunity there. So if you are still here and you are still breathing on earth, which we are, there is still an opportunity to transform your life despite the things and the challenges that we've gone through.
When you read a book, I always tell people you don't get like the depth of the story in the first couple of chapters, right? You have to read into it. You have to kind of get through those hard parts to really dive into the part you need to hear. So we're going all the way back with you because I think when so many people hear those on podcasts and, especially in different speaking engagements, we on the outside think, man, like she's got it all together. Her life is easy. And it was not like that. We're going all the way to the beginning. We're talking childhood because I think so much of our mental capacity and how much we're willing to kind of be flexible as adults starts in our childhood. So let's talk. Let's talk about your childhood.
Absolutely. My childhood was, like many other people, and it was very challenging. It was riddled with trauma, poverty, and a lot of things that, happened. And I was born, into a household, single parent mom. My parents didn't marry. And so I think by the time I was one, my mom and dad weren't together anymore. And, then she had my sisters. So we had 3 girls. I also have a brother who's no longer in this realm with us from my father. And I think it was challenging for my mom. And when you talked about generational curses and things that have happened, even before I was born, I think that does kind of spill over into the next generation and how people experience life and how they become parents. And so I think my mom was definitely challenged. She faced a lot of medical issues, mental health issues. And, as a result, there was a lot of abuse in the home with me specifically. And, I experienced a lot of different things, also, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and also sexual abuse as well as a child. And it really forced me to grow up at a very young age. And I had to help raise my sisters because as a child. And it really forced me to grow up. People outside the home didn't find out, in our home and at our family, it was what happens in our home stays in our home. So, there wasn't going out and telling people. And what happened was in junior high school, we had a social worker come in, crazy. And she actually wasn't junior high school, it was middle school. And I don't know if the school knew what was going on. If there was some things that, because I would hide my bruises and on days that I had bruises that were visible, she would keep me home, And so I remember there was one day when the social worker came And she brought this small group of people. And I talk about this in my book that's coming out, so I don't want to spill all of it. But she took a group of us to the side, in another room, and she talked with us girls. And it was maybe four of us, I don't know, four or five of us. And I thought, oh, that's odd, that because she was talking to the school about, the way you're supposed to be treated. She started talking about abuse. She didn't use those terms, but she was just talking about, what's appropriate and how to be treated. And I remember Tabitha breaking down. I could not even contain. I was crying so bad I couldn't talk. It was like somebody snatched my soul out of me that day. And she ended up talking to me individually after that. And she became someone that I could confide in. And so after many, many years, I ended up being, removed from my home. The police removed me. There were bruises that were all visible. And I went to live with my grandmother, my mother's mother, and, did very well in school. And what happened was I feel like there were angels that surrounded me. There was always someone there. Either I was put in a gifted and talented program, STEM programs, gifted writing program. It was just all these people. And so I got love from school, from from teachers and that was my validation. That was my love. And so I grew up knowing, I had my first job, at 9, I had a paper route. And then, at 14 and a half, I worked at McDonald's, and then I worked there till I was 18. I became a manager at 16. I negotiated with my boss at that time. And so what happened was I grew up basically becoming this person who had to wear this exterior. So when you said people don't know what you've experienced and they see, this person that has, that has it all or whatever, they don't know what you've been through to get there and how you still continue to experience life, and knowing that you have a higher purpose, because especially in the veteran community, which, this is going from childhood to adult, things change and we experience the world very differently. And some people who've experienced things that I've experienced their lives went a little bit different from mine. And so, I'm here to basically share my story, to tell people that, you can get through. And I think it's important as you continue to go through life, and even as an adult, to really start to peel back those layers and really determine who you really are. When the curtains come down and the lights turn off, who really are you intrinsically, without all of the validation and the awards and all of the things. So
it's normal, I think, for our generation, which I'm totally going to age myself and I do all the time. Totally fine. But I think we received a lot of validation from the community, right? Like we found a support system where we felt we fit, but that was normal, because if it wasn't happening in your four walls, you didn't pay attention to your neighbor. That was like a huge mind your business. Then when you went to school, it was almost this like sense of protection, right? My house is not like everybody else's house. It came with like this almost shame and this guilt, no matter what your household looked, right? So then we found a sense of community, which I think led you into joining the military. And again, thank you for your service, because as a female in the military, powerhouse. That's all you can say is powerhouse, because you've said it before, especially, in speaking engagements and podcasts that you've been on, you were looked at in your uniform, right? You were not looked at for who you were as a female, what you brought to the table, your experience. It was just your last name, your rank, your uniform, get in, get out. It's normal in the military, but you're also changing that perspective of the lifestyle as a veteran mixed with trauma, mixed with, like you said, peeling those layers, which brings me to, if that wasn't even like a tip of the iceberg, you had a near-death experience. Like, is there anything on the table that has not tried you as a person, and like you come out on the other side?
And every day is a new day. I will say that. I don't want to give this illusion. And that's where I want to be very careful with my platforms. I don't want to give this illusion that every day you have to get up and decide am I going to get out of this bed today? Am I going to show up not only for myself, but for the calling that has been put on my life?
Mhm.
So in 2020, again, I'm going through life. Life is great. I'm married. I'm, over 19 years, 18 years of service, maybe at that time. And I'm like, okay, life is good, and I'm deploying, it's at the height of COVID. I've been on a million deployments. This is what I do. And it wasn't until I faced my own, really life-changing experience as an adult that it was like, oh, who are you? You're facing yourself at that door, and when you almost cross over, you know what I mean? When you have that near-death experience, you're faced with something completely different. And so it's almost like the world doesn't even exist the way you know it. And so that's where the turning point really happened. But, I was deployed to the Navajo Nation during the height of COVID. We didn't have immunizations. We didn't have prophylactics. And so I was going out there to be the mental health lead, to provide mental health services to two medical institutions for the staff there. And I would say that was one of the most traumatic experiences that I've experienced because number one, a lot was going on in our country at that time. We had the George Floyd incident. We had the Tiana incident, and we had the drawdown on Afghanistan. So I had signed up, I had did ROTC, junior ROTC in high school. I did 2 years of ROTC in college. And, I knew that life of service. And so the day 9/11 happened, I said, I'm going in the Air Force. And I ended up going in the Air Force. And so when you're faced with something that challenges the status quo or what you believed or what you knew, and then you have all this trauma that you're facing and your own life is in danger. I went to one of the most red zones in the world at the time. The death toll was very high. And so things happened that it was like a real spiritual experience. It wasn't, again, it was different. And I didn't at the time understand what was happening to me. But it was like I was hearing the stories. I was hearing, the past history and the stories and what was facing there. And then there was danger there as well for people who've been from different reservations. That I actually stayed on the reservation in a very desolate area. It was very traumatic. And I started to question a lot of things with my own existence. Like, am I really serving? I come out here, I have all this rank, and what am I really doing? I was like questioning so many things. And like I said, so many things were going on in our country at the time. And it wasn't until I came home and, I was exercising. What do we do? For people who are really resilient, we exercise, we get in that gym, we do it. We do what we have to do. I did a lot of bodybuilding. I didn't compete, but in a lot of races. So I know what to do, And so one day I thought I must have just overdid it on my Peloton or whatever I was doing. I was doing it like several times a day. I was like I needed to get it out. I needed to. And that's the way I knew at the time, along with prayer and meditation. There was this energy that I needed to get off me. So one night I get up and I try to go to the bathroom and I can't walk. And so I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? And I didn't want to wake my husband up. He's also a vet, Army vet as well, retired from the Army. So anyways, I crawled to the bathroom and I couldn't get up. So I'm just in the bathroom crying. What's going on? I can't get up. So he hears me. He comes in the bathroom and he's like, what's going on? He gets me up and I'm like, I can't walk. I was in extreme pain. And again, what do? We know how to do it. We put the heating pad, we get some Advil, Tiger Balm, right? When I did karate when I was a teenager, you got all the ancient Chinese secrets, available to you. And so anyways, I tried to do it on my own, went, to the hospital a couple times. They gave me morphine, sent me home, say, follow up with your PCM, nothing's wrong. So anyways, I ended up getting hospitalized at Walter Reed Medical Center. I was there for 4 days and I knew I was transitioning to the other side. And there were some signs that I was transitioning to because my grandmother had came to me in my dreams. Now, when we talk about spiritual gifts, that is one that I have, the gift of feeling and the gift of dreams. And so I get messages, and I used to get them even as a little child. And so my grandmother had came into my dream, but again, I didn't know this at the time. She came to me in my dream when I came back from deployment. And she basically gave me the message that it was time for me to go with her. And I'm like, cool. I was at peace. Like, get out of here. I don't want to deal with this. Because when you deal with trauma as an adult and you didn't deal with that trauma as a child, and those nice little boxes that you had in the closet, all compartmentalized, put there, opens, everything. Wait a minute, I don't even know what I'm dealing with right now. And so anyway, the door is open. And so after 4 days of being in the hospital, again, I didn't associate what my grandmother had told me at the time. But I knew it was time to go. I was sending messages. One of my girlfriends was in Afghanistan at the time, and she ended up coming home sick, and she ended up passing in 2022. So she came home in 2021. That was the end of 2020 when I had this experience. 4 days after I'm in the hospital, they came to me and said, Captain Harrell, and by this time I had changed to another service, the United States Public Health Service. So we go by Navy ranks. And so they came to me, Captain Harrell, we can't find anything. We're sending you home today. So that was after 4 days. And I knew I was passing away. And again, most people will look at us and say, hey, you're fine. Nothing's wrong with you. We can't find anything. So they said, we're going to send in a psychiatrist. Now I'm a mental health provider. I've been doing mental health for almost 30 years now. Is this a somatics? Is this real? What is pain? Now we know about pain and how it's exacerbated by mental health, diagnoses and stuff. We know that. But I'm like, no, this pain is something else. This is death pain. Like, you can't live with this pain. So I told them they could euthanize me. Call it, get the paperwork. I didn't know if they had assisted suicide or what they had. I just know I need to get out of here. And so they ended up doing a sample. They sent in a psychiatrist, and I'm talking to him. He's talking to me like a colleague. And I couldn't even be a patient because I knew if they sent me to the mental health side of the hospital, I would have died. So they did a sample of my hip, and I had a septic. So if you know about sepsis, basically people who have that, they die in a very short period of time. So I could have died that day, the next day, or the next day. But I just know right now that I'm just so blessed to be here and to share my story, because people are coming to me, even the people who are, my book is coming out. I have the readers, people doing reviews, and people are calling me crying. They're like, you're not alone. Other people have experienced some of these things you've experienced. And so, especially with the amount of suicides in our veteran population, I want to be there to say, you know what? Yes, it's challenging. Yes, you have to advocate, but you can absolutely do it.
I get chills thinking about that because working prior, I got COVID in 2020, wrecked my entire immune system, really kind of like awoke things in my body that I didn't even realize were dormant, which happened with a lot of people. But the amount of people that have just a lot of issues medically that healthcare just failed, right? But then you look at that in the veteran community and healthcare really fails, or we're just at the point where it does combine with mental health. A lot of people just give up. They don't want to advocate for themselves. They don't want to make the fight even harder or longer or worse. And yet knowing sepsis, like you were within hours. I mean, that goes fast. That goes very quickly. That just gives me chills. Like, spiritually something is like awakened in you with the pain at the same time. Like,
absolutely. Absolutely. Honestly, it's completely changed my life. After I had two surgeries back to back that same week. So if you've ever had hip surgery, you lose a lot of blood. So with that, I couldn't get the hip replacement that week because I had the sepsis. So I had to be on a PIP, with antibiotics for maybe 6 to 8 weeks. I was in the hospital for a month and a half, and then I had to go to rehab, learn how to walk again, especially with the spacer that I had. And then in November, I got the actual hip replacement. Well, it triggered, like you said, so many things that might have been dormant. And so in April of the next year, I thought I was having a stroke. It felt like, what do you call it? Like the thunder, like lightning was hitting my head. It was pain that you couldn't, I was having chest pains. I thought I was having a stroke. So went back to the hospital. They did a chest x-ray. I had all these lesions all over my chest. And so when they're talking to me, they're like, you know how people get quiet? Like it's this eerie kind of silence. So I was like, what is the lady, the nurse prayed with me in the ER. She said, it could be cancer. And, so I was just like, wow, I'd already faced all these things and, where I was on a whirlwind of medication and just everything that was happening along with the trauma and the pain. And so it took them about 6 months to diagnose me. I was in the hospital for a week. I got Bell's palsy 2 days later. So my face completely drooped and I thought I had a terminal disease and they weren't telling me. So we went back and my husband's like, we can hear you in the hallway. I'm yelling, tell me if if I got days, like y'all better tell me because your body's telling you. Like, get out of here. Again, all these things, it's time, something's going on. So it took them about 6 months to diagnose me. Got diagnosed with sarcoidosis. And what's funny is you talk about the healthcare system, and I'm not downing it because I've done mental health in the military health system for, over 20 years. So I really understand, the challenges that the professionals, the medical professional space, I understand from both sides and both perspectives, but it was just crazy, just trying to navigate that system. Understanding it was during COVID, there weren't a lot of resources available. But the day that I get diagnosed officially, okay, because they didn't know if it was cancer, I was on oral chemo, I was on prednisone, all the things. So they tell me we have this care coordinator. And, she was a lovely nurse. And so she took me in the room and, I wanted to be very vulnerable with her. She was a woman of color. She was a nurse. And so I was just like, listen, I've never heard of sarcoidosis. I'm not familiar. Guess what's the first thing she said to me? Now, this is the care coordinator, this person who, does, I guess, the support groups and, brings you in for the annual sarcoidosis month or whatever. She said to me, yes, you do. Bernie Mac died of it. That's the first thing she says to me. What? Like this. Now I really don't want to be here. Like, thank you. If I got to live the rest of my life, with all these medical things, like, I really don't want to do this. And then I got to fight the care and y'all even diagnose, y'all poked and prodded on me for a whole year. All these tests, all these I was done. Okay, I'm done with all this. I believe that was the first thing she said to me. And I'm turning to her like, I'm a mental health provider and I'd love to, once I get healed, I'd love to support you to really help people to understand what this means for them. Uh-huh. It was honestly, I don't want to use this term, but it was a shit show.
Sounds about right. It's interesting because when you said like they didn't know about this or my pain or this, it's interesting because obviously working in healthcare for so long, we've linked our brain and our gut is all interconnected, right? We know our bodies. I've said this on so many other episodes. We know our bodies. When the medical community cannot understand physically what is wrong with your body, they instantly go to your brain. Maybe this is all in your head, which coming from a past of trauma and as a child, you probably don't know how to deal with trauma until you're like junior high, high school. Then in high school, we just kind of like brush it off like, well, everybody goes through something. My life wasn't that bad. So I brushed it aside. So as adults, like you said, now we're unpacking medical because everything shifted in COVID to face-to-face. Let me get my hands on you and actually see physically what is going wrong with you to, I'm going to throw you behind a screen and then we'll talk about your mental health later. Like, no, your brain and your gut are connected. Everything you do on the inside reflects on the outside and vice versa, which It's kind of interesting because you talked about this of you've asked yourself like why. I think that's normal when it comes to trauma, medical conditions, diagnosis, because we get really hard on ourselves. And we said it before I hit record. Even though we don't look sick, doesn't mean we're not sick. Like we got out of bed and put makeup on. So for those listening, like that's a feat. Like we showed up today.
Getting out of bed some days. And that's why I do what I do is, I talk about the power of manifestation and manifesting your healing. So I use the terms in order to be, to explain to people what's going on, but I don't use those terms on a daily basis. And even in the hospital, I got my husband to bring one of my stylists brought clothes. She has a boutique. She brought clothes to him. And so when I was able to get out of bed after a certain period of time, I started wearing my own clothes during the day. You can't, number one, they're not going to heal you. They don't have the capacity to heal you. Number two, you have to figure out how to heal yourself. So I believe that we have been given these gifts in order to align. You ever been in a position where you're like, how am I going to do this one thing? I don't know, I might have prayed on it, I might have meditated on it, or I might have just really kind of soaked it all in my spirit and tried to figure it out. And something happens and you're like, oh, I'm waiting for my car to get fixed. You're in the lobby and you talk to somebody next to you and they're telling you what you need to know and you get their number and how does that work? So it's like habit, like everything is, all of this in the 3D is not really real. We were, in existence before we even got here, right? And we'll be in existence when we're no longer here. And so there must be some connection with the divine, your higher power, God, because how do we have intuition that says, no, don't, oh, I walked in this store or I need to get gas at night and I'm passing by and I'm on E and I got 2 minutes to get home. Something's telling me not to stop there. Okay. Or I was supposed to get on this plane. Something told me that I'm supposed to take this trip, but something told me not to go. So it's just because we are so inundated with our minds, our spirit, with, the internet, the television, everything that's going on around you, all the noise, we can't always hear. And sometimes we do hear and we don't want to listen. We get spanked a little bit, little spiritual spanking. And so I believe that I don't know everything, but what I will say is when I decided to surrender, and I had to get this tattoo on my arm that says the art of surrender, because I just have to I need to be reminded, when you surrender, the world just turns. Like I wouldn't even be on this podcast with you now had that not happened, because I had to retire earlier than anticipated. I wanted to do 30 years. I wanted to make Admiral. That was a goal of mine. And I thought my world was ending because my form of validation after all that trauma, right? That was my form of love. But guess what? Those curtains closed. The phone stopped ringing. You know what I mean? All the people who were your mentors, your mentees, phone stopped ringing. There's no saluting at home. Your title's gone. You're no longer this person that you knew that you thought you were. And so who are you outside of that? And so now it's forced me to face myself personally to say, who are you now? And what is my true purpose? And so now I believe I feel like I'm more aligned than I was doing that. Especially going to people who are truly in poverty, right? Who don't have running water in their homes. And you're coming in there like, yeah, I'm gonna talk to you about resiliency. What?
Yeah.
What? This is a joke. You think you can tell me a couple things? How about that? And so this mask and this ideology of, who you are in the world, as opposed to who you are with your true divine purpose, are two different things. A lot of times there are some people who are truly walking in their calling, but the world, when it talks about your gifts will make room for you, all I had to do was surrender and just be obedient. I don't want to tell my story. I'm embarrassed to tell my story. I'm human. I'm still human. I don't want to talk about what I deal with and how, I want the world to just see me as this perfect person who I've always thought they've seen me as. But now, in order to really walk in your calling and to heal, you have to be honest and really follow your calling. It's scary. People may judge that, but it's fine. It's not for them. If it's not for them, it's going to reach the people who need to be reached. And so I've just learned, the art of surrender, the art of forgiveness. I think that's really a part of it. A lot of the medical ailments that we hold on to or that we have are associated with different things that we've gone through emotionally. So the chest area, that's grief. You know what I mean? The stuff that's going on the left side of your body is with a female entity, that you might have had an issue with or unresolved. So I'm just learning all of these things. And I had to turn to a lot of spiritual teachings and things you're not going to learn, through the medical community or through even other entities, that you might follow or learn from or what you thought you knew. And so you have to really, to get understanding, you have to be open to really learning new things that you never would have thought about before.
You talk about wearing a mask, which sitting here and looking at it from my perspective with all of us, it's interesting to me because I think we all wear a mask. In our childhood, we wear a mask because that's how we're raised, right? Like you dress up. If you want to be something that you're not, just pretend. Fairy tale life, pretend you're somebody else, pretend you're something else somewhere else. So it's always this pretend. Then we get into our young adult life where we put a mask on because we don't want to let anyone down. We want to be supported and loved, and we want to be the best of the best, and we think we can do everything and anything. Then we kind of fall on our faces in our 30s and our 40s, and we're like, oh, maybe my friends or my mom or my grandmother was right. Like I maybe should have listened to that aspect. But I think it's interesting because in the military, you worked very closely in mental health, which makes me ask, I always put everybody in the hot seat. Do you feel like that was your calling in mental health because you did wear a mask? You were in almost this character type life of like, this is how I was in my upbringing, but now since I'm kind of unlocking doors, I want to help heal other people. And then that medical was kind of a setback because now the mask was for yourself, looking in the mirror. You don't want to let yourself down. You don't want to admit that like, I'm not strong enough physically to do this, or my body did amazing things. And now, do you feel like you're always in a sense of having a mask on, just the mask changes?
It depends. I think for some people that could be the case. But for me, well, number one, as a child, I didn't consider it a mask because when you go to when you have people who were born in the South and who migrated to the North, there was nothing else that existed. So when I went to my grandparents, none of that stuff existed. So it wasn't even wearing a mask. It's like, it's done. Throw it away. We're not talking about mental health was not a topic. Healing was not a topic. You're done with that. Put it away. We're moving on, and our family came from this. And so you are expected to be this. So really being raised by my grandparents, very strong women from the South, I didn't think of it like a mask because, again, this is who you are. There was no, you're going to college. This is what you're doing. There was no, there wasn't any of that. Now, I didn't really realize I was wearing the mask until the trauma happened as an adult, in 2020. I just knew, again, it was gone. But helping people, within the mental health and helping them unpack all of that and knowing all the modalities, I didn't associate myself as one of them. I was something else, right? I didn't, it wasn't even an association with other people. I'm who I am. So I built this character that didn't identify with that. And so I did that because I wanted to understand the human mind. I wanted to understand mental illness. I wanted to understand addictions. My mom had struggled with that, medication, alcohol, all these things. So I just wanted to understand. And before the military, I was in forensics. I wanted to be a criminal profiler. I was a correctional officer. Then I became a correctional counselor. I wanted to do prison reform. And then I also worked for child welfare right before, went in the military for the child fatalities and serious injuries. So I was always in this trying to understand where this darkness could come from and how to prevent it and how to make society a better place. But again, I was attracted to that because I had faced so much darkness and I wanted to be, the Clarice Starling that came in and helped everybody. But again, I had this character. I still didn't associate until I was forced to be a human. Again, I put myself through race, all bodybuild, all these things. That's what I knew. And so I was able to get through it. So I just thought I'm the chosen person to help, like chosen, but I'm the person, I'm different. And so again, I didn't realize the humanistic side of it really until, even though I know it's an oxymoron, but it wasn't until I was forced, that mask got snatched right off my face. It was like, oh, you know what I mean? And so that's really what happened. It was snatched. I didn't anticipate it. I would have still been doing what I did. And again, everything was going well. Status quo. Everything's in the closet. I'll deal with it at one day. I knew I had to deal with it one day. I knew, and I think one of the big things is when I got married, because when you're living alone and you're traveling the world, you know what I mean? And you have a higher rank, you don't really date anyways, because you're like, you can't mess up my career. You need background checks, you need all this. But it wasn't until I got married where it was like, oh, I'm not perfect. What do you mean? Like, what's wrong with you? Any other guy, you date him, you get rid of him. Oh, I'm not. No, something's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with me. But it wasn't until you're forced. I think that's when a kind of a little shift came too, because it was like, oh, I got to look at myself now. I got to interact for real.
That's the scary part. Let's say to it. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, there she is. Yep. Because everyone always asks in the comment sections, like, your eyes quiet. And I'm like, my brain's going 90 miles a minute constantly because none of these are ever scripted. It's always the flow of where the conversation goes. Here you talk about your childhood and then it's like, okay, this is just who you are. Get over it. And then you go into the military and it's like, this is who you are. And I have to help. I have to fix people. I have to bring light to darkness. I have to figure out the why. Right. And then that's over. Then you get married. It's like, okay, now I have to figure out the why of like, maybe this didn't work or maybe I'm the problem. Probably not, but maybe. So yeah, it's always this constant question of the why. I think that's for so many of us listeners, male or female, no matter what you've gone through your childhood or anything, we're always trying to figure out the why. And this conversation has showed me you don't have to have the why. It's show up in every situation, show up as yourself. And then you're going to figure out not the why did this happen to me or to this person. It's what am I learning so that I can help somebody else fix this, or you take pieces of your community with you, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. I think that brings me to the question of you don't have control, right? And with control or the need for control comes anger, comes animosity. So you have to just let that go in order to move forward. So I think if we have a listener right now that's like, I'm listening to this, I'm driving to work, I want to reinvent myself, right? I want to transform myself. You're always going to be you to your core. So for those listening, what do we have the control of from trauma or reinventing ourselves? What do we have control over?
We have control over how we experience the world. So a lot of us hold on to that trauma and anger. And so we're in pain all the time. We have all these ailments that come upon our bodies. So that's what we have control over, how we respond, how we experience the world. And if we're suffering, it's a choice. And so I decided that I didn't want to suffer. And suffering, again, that term is in the eye of the beholder, because you can still be in a pain, but not suffer, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a way that you experience things on a spiritual level. And also, you may not know why, but I believe that everything that happens kind of catapults you into where you're supposed to be in some sense. So some people keep going through things because they keep getting those those turns and twists because they're not on the right road.
Mhm.
So you keep getting banged in the head, keep getting in relationships with the same types of people, the same narcissists. They all have these, but you're choosing them. You're aligning with them, right? I keep switching jobs, keep having that same boss. So everything that we're going through, and some people have been through so much trauma, like so, even terrible things, and it has, I think of, who was it? Adam Walsh, who was on that show with the missing children and what happened to his son and him putting that out there. That was a terrible tragedy that no one, no parent, no individual, no family member would ever want to face. And I know because my brother, and so those are unimaginable things that we would never want to face. But now that he had this big calling, right, to save children, to help save lives. And so you may not understand why, but I believe that it might elevate you to a position to help other people in a way that is larger than you can even imagine. And so, yeah, that's what I believe.
So you have an upcoming book coming out, God Has My Six. When I say that title, I'm like, that just like shivers into every bone in my body. What's this book about? Because I'm going to have to have it.
So I'm getting the reviews now, and it is basically a book that God Has My Six. The title, the reason why I chose that is because in the military, I actually have been saying that for years, but in the military, when we look at direction, it goes by, the clock, in the direction of the clock. And so your six is your back. So that's the code, that we use. And so there are some times in life when you feel like no one's there. You might be in a room full of people. You might have doctors around you, and you feel like you are completely alone. Like you are alone in darkness and no one can understand what you've been through. And what I'm saying is God is always going to be there to have your back. Despite you feeling God there or not, or your higher power, whatever you believe, there is someone there who is guiding you through that process. And a lot of people who go through trauma feel disconnected from God. I've treated so many people who've gone through trauma that would say, how can I go through this if there's a God and I'm a servant and I'm faithful and I'm doing all these things. And so, there's evil that exists too, right? There's darkness that exists. There's light and there's dark. There's the yin and the yang. Again, ultimately, it's going to lead you down a path that you may have never have believed that you'd gone through or that you would go through. And I think about, David Goggins' book that came out, because I actually listened to his audiobooks when I couldn't read, when I couldn't see him on these meds, and I listened to him, and I'm actually going to see him today. And so I just was really inspired by that. And I said, you know what? I need to put a book out that is going to bring people down that journey, but also give them, light and give them tools and techniques that I used, to transform myself, because I'm not even the person that I was before I got sick. And I'm not the person that I was a month ago. When you're on this trajectory of elevation and bringing yourself into more light, things move at a rapid pace, And so this book is a riveting tale, of my journey through the traumas. And it talks about all those miracles and those things that have happened and the tools that I've used, the holistic wellness. And it has exercises and all those things to help you to get through those things. And so, if you're someone who's gone through it, who may not feel like you're going through it now, and you're like, oh, I'll put it away. Life is going to hit you, and you're going to be faced with it at some point. So why not have a safe space to really guide yourself through it, to get the tools and the resources that you need, to get through that. And ultimately, when you do that, you're going to see all the other areas of your life are going to start to emerge. Again, you're going to meet people that you never would have thought you would have met, who has a following. Didn't have any of that. My social medias were bleak. Nothing was available, But because I feel like I'm walking in my calling and in my purpose, I don't want to tell this story. I don't want to talk about trauma, but I feel like it's going to help someone else. And putting that spark and that joy brings back that joy to myself as well. So that's what it's about.
Love it. Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate you stopping by and sharing the trauma because you reopen wounds. It's never going to be something that's like permanently shut for life, right? But you reopen it. And then I think when you talk about it, you tend to heal yourself in a certain way. And with this podcast and platform, we're connecting with each other. So if you have a trauma, maybe you're in that trauma right now. Maybe you're really in that darkness, or maybe you're just kind of in that memorial, right? Because, we have those times of the year, they kind of come back and haunt us. But I wanted to get this episode out there for everybody because it's never too late. You don't need a date on the calendar to transform yourself. It doesn't have to be a Monday or a certain day of the year. You can start unpacking the mess. Life is super messy. You can unpack it at any time. Because like she said, if you don't unpack it, trust me, she's going to show up on your doorstep. Malaysia's not going to. I wish she would. But your life is going to show up at your front door with all of your suitcases that the zippers are broken because you can't cram anything else in there. You can't sit on it. You can't move with it. And you're going to have to unpack the messy at some point in life. So doesn't mean you're going to do it all in one day, 1 month, 1 year. It's a lifetime and you'll take steps forward, steps backwards. But I loved having you on because you're the epitome of like, life can really suck. Like it can just suck. It doesn't mean you stay there, but it also doesn't mean that you have it all and you've arrived and it's not a button that you click. I wish we could get that button. God holds that button. We do not. But I'm so excited to see your book come out in January. Here. And thank you again for coming on, sharing your story and letting us know to unpack the messy.
And thank you, Tabitha. I just want us to sprinkle a little bit of light in your world.
Yes, absolutely. Well, take care. And I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to be hearing from you. I'll put all your information in the bio description. Check her out, give her a follow, grow that social platform, share this episode. Maybe there's somebody who really needs it, or maybe that person is you. You can keep us on repeat as long as you need. That's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you enjoyed our time together, and I want to thank you for sharing it with me and the guest. A huge thank you as well to our guests as well as possible sponsors, because we're stronger together, louder as one, and truly connected like a family. If you loved today's episode, please leave a review. Help bring others along for the journey with us. And don't forget to tune in on your favorite streaming platform every week. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Little Bit of Life Podcast, so you can be part of the action and yes, part of the interview with our video content. Thank you again for joining me, and I would love to have you come on as a guest. If you're interested, send me a message. Until next time, remember, be good to others, be good to you. See you next time.